Hello, welcome to this museum moment. My name is Ellie Gettinger. I'm the education director at Jewish Museum Milwaukee, and I am excited to be with you today to explore part 2 of Mildred Fish Harnack's story. So we started this week on Tuesday exploring Mildred Fish Harnack's story and talking about her life in Wisconsin. And this is all by way of saying, if you look at the Department of Public Instruction's calendar for the year, on September 16th, there's something that's called Mildred Fish Harnack Day. Mildred Fish Harnack Day was written into law in 1986. So we're 25 years after that. And I still think that there are a lot of people who don't know who this woman was. And I'm excited to be able to share her story and hoping that more of you find ways of commemorating her story on Mildred Fish Harnack Day, which is next Wednesday. So as I said the other day, she grew up in Milwaukee and went to West Division High School, which is now Milwaukee High School for the Arts, went to UW-Madison. And then it was, kind of that simple girl meets boy, falls in love, become intellectual equals, decide that they're going to pursue a life of, idealism and enthusiasm together, continue their study pursuits. And that takes us to 1929, when Mildred joins her husband Arvid in Germany. Now, this is that point in the scary movie when you're like, no, don't go to Germany. That's a terrible idea. But their real sense is that they're going to help be the people. They're going to be the people who help rebuild Germany after World War I, and really reset their kind of economic conditions. This is a picture of Arvid's family in Germany. And one of the things that he wrote early on to his mother is that Mildred looked a lot like his family. And she does. She fits in beautifully. It's almost hard to tell who is Mildred and who's not. Mildred is actually the lady who is seated next to the gentleman in the tie. And Arvid is the gentleman holding the little boy in Lederhausen looking at her. And it's a beautiful picture of a beautiful family. And this is a family that was an elite family in Germany. They were academics and scholars, and Mildred fits in. She starts her process at Humboldt University of getting a PhD in literature and fits into this family well, And I think one of the things is that she fit into kind of that sense of German society and learning in this interwar Weimar period very well, too. There are many women at the university. She finds a big social network through the embassy. And she continues to write and translate. She translates the German, she translates into German Lust for Life, the Irving Stone's book about Vincent van Gogh. So she has this whole kind of intellectual and active life and a big social circle. This is how she describes living in Germany in 1930 to her mother. The elections were disturbing, as you noticed. There is a large group of people here which, feeling the wrongness of the situation and their own poverty or danger of poverty, leaps to the conclusion that since things were better before the war, it would be a good idea to have a more absolute government again. The group names itself the National Socialists, and although it has nothing to do with socialism and the name itself is a lie, it thinks itself highly moral and, like the Ku Klux Klan, makes a campaign of hatred against the Jews. The existence of this group, as well as the smaller one of communists, whose aims are finer, endangers the government of Germany. So she does give a little hint to her own political leanings that she tends towards communism, but it also gives this really interesting insight into interwar Germany and the political wranglings before Hitler comes to power. That is, there is this sense of, wow, this is a minority. This is a scary minority. This is a scary minority that has at its core anti-Semitism, and how are they relating and how are they seeing themselves in the world? I think that line, it thinks itself highly moral and like the Ku Klux Klan makes a campaign of hatred against the Jews, really profound and very prescient. And really the sort of comment that one makes if they've seen racism in the United States and gives them a way of comparing what they're seeing in Germany. When Hitler comes to power, their lives change almost immediately. And I think one of the things that I was marked by, and the letters that I'm reading from were discovered in a cachet belonging to Mildred's sister, I believe in the 1990s. Like, this was in an attic, it was stored, and it gives you a very good insight into her life. And she wrote often, and she was a great letter writer. But once the Nazis come to power, the way she writes shifts immediately. This is May 1933. And you remember how she described the Nazis in 1930. So in 3 years, I don't think her worldview has changed so much as to say this, but I think she's now in a very cautious place in writing her letters to her mother and trying to explain to her mother what it's like to be under Nazi oppression and to make sure those letters actually get out without causing her to come under any sort of suspicion. And she writes here, there is a great impulse in masses of people which can be roused, a very great and beautiful impulse. You know, I thought the impulse was rightly directed in the war. She was a pacifist, by the way. And I think it is being directed rightly in the same way now. It's being given the right motives versus the Jews and the radicals. And I think this is what she has to write. Throughout the rest of this period, as letters continue to go back and forth in the 1930s, I feel that she uses a bit of a code of talking about literature in order to be able to express her profound ideas without having the censor understand what she's saying. So in one letter, she uses the idea of a book called Weinberg, Ohio, which she misattributes in such a way that her mom can understand what's going on as compared to the way that the town in Weinberg, Ohio is impacted. So it's really interesting to see how her love of literature continues to be part of the way that she communicates. But also her life, once the Nazis come into power, changes in a number of different ways. One of these is that women are no longer allowed to do things like go to university. And though she finishes her PhD, she goes from being on a track of being like a university professor to leading night classes. Women are eliminated from all of those sorts of educational positions, and men take them because women are supposed to be at home having children and having babies. Mildred never has babies. So there's this interesting dilemma. What does one do if you can't fit into that realm? And through her night classes and through a number of different arenas that they're involved in, Mildred and Arvid become active in a group that becomes known as the Red Orchestra. This is what the Nazis call them. And the other couple that you see here their names are Libertas and Haro Schulze-Boysen. And they are also kind of elite people in that times. Libertas is a filmmaker. Haro is a soldier. He's in the Air Force, I believe. And Arvid is working in a high position in the Ministry of Economics, and they're all using these positions to convey information. Their early part of their resistance plan is really to convey information and to kind of ask for resistance within Germany. They're publishing pamphlets and things like that are giving a better sense of what's going on the front. They're telling you about about Nazi persecution. They're doing lots of action in that way. As the war continues and they see that the Soviet Union is about to be invaded, they actually try to get a message to Stalin to say, hey, Hitler's going to invade the Soviet Union, and he chooses to ignore that message. They have a system of radios in which they are trying to broadcast to the Soviet Union. And I can say, as opposed to their resistance in which they're publishing pamphlets and things like that, this piece seems less successful. These are the pieces that are intercepted. These are the things that lead to their capture. But they're doing all sorts of things. And I think Mildred's role in particular is she's taking American news and translating it, and English news and translating it so that the German front population is actually getting a clearer understanding of what's going on in the war. But they are captured in 1942. Arvid is immediately put to death, as is Haro Schulze-Boysen. And he writes this letter to her. And he writes in this letter, despite all the hardships, I'm happy to look back on my life so far. The light outweighed the dark, and our marriage was largely the reason for this. And it's one of these letters that is such a beautiful love letter. He talks about meeting in Wisconsin. He talks about their conversations and how, their first time they talked, they spent 5 hours, sharing their thoughts and ideas. And it really shows a marriage of equals, that these are people who were passionate about each other and passionate about each other's ideas. And it is so romantic and so sad. So he is killed, and she is tried. And in her initial trial, she's found guilty and sentenced to hard labor, which means going to a concentration camp. So there's no sense that she might survive that. And it's like 8 years of hard labor. In this period, in 1943, it's February 1943, Germany has just lost a big battle at Stalingrad. And there's this sense that whatever is happening in Germany needs to really send clear messages that resistance is futile, that you can't resist the Nazi regime. And Hitler is nervous in particular about this elite group of resistors, that they're going to be seen as an example. If these people who are high up in the Nazi party, if they were involved, if they are seen as being, that things are lenient for them, then maybe this will inspire other people to resistance. So he has Mildred retried, which I think for those of us in the realm of thinking about the Holocaust is a little bit of a strange thing, that there's anything like a trial under the Nazi regime. And it is basically a show trial. But in this new trial, she is sentenced to death. And she is actually killed by guillotine, which is pictured here, at Plötzensee prison, where about 3,000 prisoners were killed, including Arvid. And Mildred's head and I believe her body are recovered and given to her. All of these bodies are given to the University for Science. Someone who finds her recognizes her body and gives it back to the Harnack family. So she is buried at a gravesite, which is unusual and impressive. But I think one of the things that strikes me about this story is even in this last moment, as she's considering death, as she knows that she's going to die, her husband has died, she has come to this country, a country that she loved and that she thought she could change, and she is now going to die for that country, in that country. And the last thing she writes is actually a translation of Goethe's poem Vermächtnis, which means bequest or legacy, which I think is such a statement that this is the poem she's concentrating on at the end. And I want to read the first and last stanza. It says, "No being can to nothing fall. The everlasting lives in all. Sustain yourself with joy and joy with life. Life is eternal. There are laws to keep the living's treasures cause, with which the worlds are rife. And once you know the benediction of dwelling deep in the conviction, the fruitful only is the true. You scan in their general sway. They'll keep disposing in their way. Your place is with a chosen few." Which is such a statement of, yes, I'm dying, but here is my legacy, and my place is with a chosen few. There's so many ways to get more information about Mildred Fish Harnack. Here are some of the fabulous books that have been written about her. Resisting Hitler is about her specifically. It's a biography. In the Garden of Beasts is actually about the American Embassy in the 1930s. And she features into it. There is a little bit of an inaccuracy because of the way the archives that he uses are used. So I would encourage you to explore both. And I haven't read this one, but I'm excited to. Resistance Women is a fiction novel that was based on Mildred's experience. And then if you go to Wisconsin Public Television's website, you can find their hour-long documentary that was produced several years ago called Wisconsin's Nazi Resistance. This commemoration happens every year and has happened since 1986 and is the work of one gentleman in partnership with others, a guy named Art Heitzer. And Art started this process of trying to create Mildred Fish Harnack Day in the early 80s to commemorate who she was and what she'd done. He worked really hard and tirelessly. And one of the things he had to overcome is the fact that after the war, there was this legacy that Mildred and Arvid were communists. And so any resistance they had should be discounted. And it takes really pushing through a lot of Cold War barriers in order to ensure that Mildred has any legacy. And I think that's some of the reason why she's lesser known today. My hope is that each year, Mildred Fish Harnack Day can become a bigger and bigger commemoration. And I hope you'll look out for some of these resources and Thank you so much for joining me for this museum moment. If you'd like this or any of our other moments, please feel free to drop by our website and make a donation.